Hello, this is Phil McNally, and I'm with Artist2Artist. Today, we're going to be talking with John Pototschnik. And those who do not know who he is a who's who of painting. He does a lot of color, does a lot of different things with his style, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So, welcome to the show, John.
Hey, Phil, thanks. Nice to talk to you. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so am I, because John, in my respect, I've known him quite some time under the covers, as far as through his internet and his video courses and some of the other, just coming across other artists who know him. So and unfortunately, he lives close to me, so that was probably like part of the deal. But other than that. Let's move on into some other area that you're in, and that is just all the awards that you've won. I mean, I've looked through the end of the book, and it's just you just done a lot of shows. I mean, you've been doing this for 30 years, since 1982. So give me a kind of idea from the 1982 side, that what got you to be so recognized.
Well, again, like illustration, it was a lot of work. When I started off, I was totally unknown, and so I thought I was successful as an illustrator, making good money, and I thought, yeah, I'm now a fine artist. I declared that I'm now a fine artist. So I just
That's how it works. They call that's how you figure it out. I'm now an artist. I'm now an artist. I'm now a professional artist.
yeah, exactly. So all that really changed was my subject matter. I was still working in acrylic at the very beginning, and I took my work into a local gallery, and I showed my work, and they said, "Oh, you're an illustrator, aren't you?"
They got you.
I said, "No, I'm a fine artist." Excuse me. So I realized there's an issue here I need to deal with. And I had an illustrator friend who was also in Dallas and had gone national with his work, Tony Eubanks, who had switched to fine art a few years before. And I called him up and talked to him. He says, "Yep, you need to take your work outside and start working on location. It will really help you see the difference between the fine art world and the illustration world, just because of hard edges, the brilliancy of the color, all that stuff." And so that was a huge turnaround for me. And I realized, yeah, I've got to really change my palette. I need to study nature a lot more and all that stuff. So that's how it started. So
Look at let me bring up let's go into the painting side of things, and we can talk a little bit about your paintings, and go there and see what we can bring up. I have something over here that this particular
yeah,
paint, which is this is what you said was one that, let me bring my screen over. This was one that you said that you recently done. It's
yeah,
Drive Surprise.
9 by 12, yeah. Yeah, it was recently done, and of course, I don't. It'd be neat to kind of be able to show you all my reference material for these paintings. That was a scene from Kansas, which is where I grew up, of course, so I still have an affinity for that, the countryside there. And came up on that scene. It was like I rounded a corner, and ooh, that barn was right there. And I thought, wow, that is awesome. I loved how it was kind of up on a rise, and also partially hidden, and it just appealed to me. And I shot this picture a long time ago, and just recently thought, yeah, I think I can make a nice painting out of that. So the picture, of course, is not that warm. The painting, I warmed it up quite a bit, what you're seeing there, but the photograph was, I'd say, much cooler. But composition, pretty much the same. I simplified it somewhat, changed the lighting just ever so slightly. Maybe I pulled up, emphasized or put a little more color into the trees on the left side, a little more than was in my photograph. Just added a little more interest throughout the painting than the photograph I clearly showed. But yeah, I think the thing about that, Phil, I liked mostly was the composition.
Yeah, yeah, it is bright, and it does kind of stand out and get your eyes. I mean,
Mhm.
that.
It's, I think that's why I put the surprise title in there, because you can visualize yourself. And I think about these paintings as I'm painting them and thinking, you know, what is really being communicated here? What did I feel when I came upon that? And that idea of surprise, it's like I'm rounding this curve in the road and, oh my, look at that. It's that kind of feel.
Right, right, right. It's hidden until you come up on it, and then all of a sudden
Mhm.
it pops, and the light was just right. Let's see if I can get another one here. Um, it just stands out. Uh, let's try this because I've seen a lot of the country feel
Mhm.
of this. I didn't get the name on this one. The Boxley Valley.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was also recent. That's a scene from Arkansas. And I added the cattle to the scene uh, just to add to the story. But really like the just the country atmosphere and then the fall colors that were created through that. And I like the big value shapes that those barns created. So yeah, that was the reason for that. But those cattle were added to add to the story and the whole environment.
So without the cattle, that would not come across as well compositionally wise.
The cattle kind of lead you in, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of why they were added. Plus, it's another element of life. You know, without the life in there, okay, yeah, that's a really pretty scene, and it would have been a fine painting. I could have added some dark accents into the grasses in the foreground to still, or lead the eye back to where I wanted it to. But this just added another dimension, you know, by putting animals in there, which is, you know, not unusual in a country farm scene. So it all made sense to me.
I
But cattle were, you know, they came from another source. It isn't as if I made them up. I had other pictures of cattle and then I added them in there.
yeah, yeah, beautiful. I mean, and I really like the background of the mountain scene back here. I mean, the values that you did on the green and the blue back there, just it's so subtle, but
Mhm.
it's so tonal. I mean, it just kind of lets the rest, the foreground and the middle ground just pop based upon that, but it doesn't
Yeah.
take away from everything else. I mean, brushwork.
Mhm.
How did you do that? Let's take the mountain scene back there that's in this place. I mean, how did brushwork on this? How did you get this brushwork in? Because there are different values of this color and different colors.
Talking about the temperature of the color back there?
Yeah, as do you lay the blue down first, and then you come in with the trees back here with the greens and the reds?
Well, the initial block in, I would have laid in everything. In fact, I think I first did this painting in total monochromatic with using raw umber. So
Oh,
I built the whole painting with raw umber and established all my value structure, all of the drawing and everything first. Once that was dry, I use this technique a lot, Phil, and I've taught it to my students also. Um, Separate the value from the color makes the color much easier because now you only have to think about color and not about the value.
right.
So I created this whole painting in raw umber and just established the value structures because it's value that creates mood. And so once I felt like I had created the correct mood, then it was a matter of selecting the palette that would achieve the coloration that I wanted for that. And then so everything was kind of laid in, and so then I would start with that in the background there. Well, no, that isn't how I started. I started with the barns. Started with that barn on the right and getting that value shape in the darkness of the darkest area of that barn, and then I built the painting, you know, color-wise around that and worked my way back. So I wouldn't have completed the trees until that background hill was done first, and then I would lay the trees on top of it. but I still had that overall value structure of raw umber to work from. And so I would match the values that were in that underpainting. I would match those values with the color that I chose to lay on top of it. So it was pretty easy. Once those values are established, I knew that, okay, we'll just say that that background hill was a middle gray, we'll say number 5 on the grayscale. So I mixed up a bluish gray. That was a number 5 on the grayscale. And I just lay it right down on top of that. And I could squint and see, okay, yeah, I see no distinction really in value between my underpainting and the color laid on top of it. And so then I know, okay, I've matched the value and now I'm just adding color to it. And that's how I built the painting all the way through.
And that's the process you use for most of your paintings?
Yeah, a lot of them. Yeah, a lot of them. Let's say this. If it's a particularly difficult painting, this was a kind of a difficult painting. There's a lot going on here.
Yes.
And also the size of it. It's I think that's a 2430. So yeah, for the more difficult ones, my smaller stuff, 9x12 or smaller, I don't usually use this technique. I'll just go in and paint direct. But for my larger stuff where I really want to make sure everything is exactly the way I want it, yeah, I'll do this technique.
This reminds me of a lot of the no-tan. Is that pretty much what we're following here? Kind of a no-tan style?
No, no-tan, they're kind of breaking it down to probably what, 2 values, maybe 3 max. I'm not concerned with that. I'm concerned with maybe 5 values. I think somewhat in that terms to kind of combine value shapes. But when I'm blocking in like that, it's all about the mood and getting that depth, that feeling of aerial perspective, and doing that just monochromatically. You think of black and white photographs. In a black and white photograph, you can tell what the mood of that is. Well, that's because the values tell you what that mood is. And so that's all I'm doing when I'm doing the block-ins. I'm creating that mood. I'm thinking in terms of that. So if this was a snow scene or a foggy scene, the values would be totally different than what I painted for Boxley Valley.
Amazing.
So it's all about the atmosphere, and that's resolved with value only, and it makes it a lot easier than having to deal with color and value at the same time. That's why I separated out, and I thought, this is a really easy way that I can teach my students. This is how all this stuff started. It was all about trying to teach and help students to simplify, because painting is such a complex deal, and I tried to simplify it as much as possible.
Well, that is simplistic. You for like you say, the larger ones, you do that underpainting scenario where you're not having to guess it again. If you start out with, oh, I'm gonna paint the barn, then I'm gonna go paint some trees, and then now I'm gonna make them all come together.
That's a good point, Phil. I can elaborate on that more, because if the value structure is established correctly with the underpainting, I could really start anywhere in the painting. All I got to do is match the values.
Right.
And so, yeah. But I generally start with around the focal point with that barn there on the right, and the darkness of the eaves underneath the roof line, and the doorway entrance. I'll get those values down. And mainly it's color at this point. So I'll get that color established, then I'll build out from there. That's pretty much how I do it.
Cool. Let's see if we can look at another one here while we're playing around. Boom, 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 boom. Go to something else on this. We're seeing all of your structures.
Yeah, I put a lot of structure in my work.
Yeah, I think this one here, end of a great day, kind of says a lot as far as I take it that was one that you threw the underpaint as far as yellow, came in with that for the tone, and then came in with everything else.
Yeah, this is interesting, because this is the subject of my current video that's just just been released on the market called Painting Values and Color. This painting the original painting for this was a 12 by 24. So it extended much farther to the left and showed another whole barn over on the left side and more of the road and all the grasses and stuff on the left side of the road. And for the video, though, Eric Rhodes wanted me to just zero in on doing a square. And so I took this part of the painting and recreated it. But yeah, it was toned. Again, on this one, for this whole painting is demonstrated on this current video I have out, and it was done in, this is where I used raw umber acrylic for the underpainting and did the whole thing in raw umber. And I used acrylic just because in this case it dried fast rather than a oil underpainting because of the video time, shoot time was compressed. So I had to kind of speed everything up. So all of it was done in a raw umber acrylic, established all the values, just what you're seeing here, but in raw umber. And then I started with a limited palette. I can't remember exactly what palette I used on this. It was not the typical just 3 primaries. It was based on 3 primaries, but a section of the color wheel. It might have had I'm just guessing. Man, I wish I could remember exactly what I used for that, but I think it might have had a blue-green in it. It was mixed from the 3 primaries and possibly, I'm not sure, I might have had a cadmium yellow in it, probably did. And my red was, I think, a cad red rather than a alizarin. I think, I'm not positive.
Kind of looks.
The point being is, it was done on top of a raw umber monochromatic block in that it had already established all these values.
Yeah, that amazes me for how nice it looks from the yellow sky and everything that you started this all on the raw umber. I mean, it's
yeah. Sky would have been pretty light. I mean, there would have been, if there was raw umber, it would have been mainly in those clouds, those reddish violet clouds down near the horizon line. You would have seen some raw umber in there and maybe a minimal amount above that, but some, not much. So it wasn't highly tinted, you know, with raw umber. And so it kept this color a little richer and lively.
all of these are canvas, right? They're no boards.
This was done on paper.
Paper.
Yeah, I use an archival paper a lot of times, particularly for some of my demos. I'll use archival paper, and then I'll tape it to a hard board and do that. But other times I will just tape a canvas to the board, and other times I will use, you know, canvas itself. But I think for all the demos I did for Streamline, they were all on. I think they were all on. Well, I think one was done on canvas. It was a larger one, and then the smaller ones were done all on paper. Gesso, it's paper, and then I gesso it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's not just raw paper.
This is an interesting one, and this looks more like it goes back to your
RML.
Yeah, your Illustrator days, because gosh, the detail on this one is
well, yeah, that's probably ties in with my personality. I guess I like to explain stuff, and so that can be crippling in a painting sometimes, you know, if I over explain. But so you kind of have to work it where, okay, I want to explain a lot of stuff, but there's still a focal point. There's still something that demands the attention, and then, oh yeah, look at all this other neat stuff. That's kind of how I feel about this painting. But no, it's not that old. I'd say it's maybe 10 years old, maybe something like that. Yeah.
What gets me on this is all the advertising that you got on the windows down the thing, and it's like, oh my God,
I love all that stuff.
He is explaining a lot here, but it is not necessarily the focal point.
No, it isn't. Yeah. And I made up the name of the store too. It wasn't Dawson's, it was something else.
Oh my gosh. Now personally, I could not do that much detail. And just like that, that's a drawing feat. And I think some people are blessed with it to where they can really do very well with the small with this type of work. I would just never that blessed. I would get this all wrong. But it'd be more impressionistic, and I'd just go for the focal point on that. But yeah, the it is beautiful. That's a really nice painting.
There's nothing wrong with that, Phil. I mean, that's what makes all of us artists unique. I mean, we got different personalities, we got different tastes, different likes. And so I've always been fascinated by paintings that are, uh, they surprise you, I guess. You
Mhm.
look at the boldness of some of the shapes, and then, oh, and then there's this little fine detail. I look at some of the 1700s, the 17th century Dutch painters.
Mhm.
And golly, their work was super detailed in tiny little paintings, a lot of them. But it all held together, and there was no question where the focal point was and all that. So it's not the detail that destroys a painting. It's understanding all the other stuff that goes into making the painting work, and that is the directional lines, the atmospheric perspective, the drawing, the concentration on the focal point, all that stuff. And then you get to enjoy all the little stuff on the side. Yeah, that really makes it interesting. And of course, this is real life right here in this painting. I mean, this is what we encounter.
Exactly.
And I like to paint that kind of stuff. I like the telephone poles. I like those little verticals that break up horizontals. I like the little color changes, all the little knickknacks and things like that that just, they add a humanity to a scene rather than just romanticize it. And I like that. And I like to create that kind of thing in pretty much all my work.
Yeah, on this one, and I guess also probably on your work, when you start something like this and come down this rate, you're not into all of the little people on the street or like the ads in the window. You're basically on focal point, right? You come from focal point on out from there.
Yeah, I call complex to simple. And everything starts boldly. It'll all start with a drawing. I mean, the architecture here is important. The placement of everything, the drawing is really important, that it feels that it belongs where it is and everything's in its correct proportion. But yeah, the people, the cars, all the little signage in the windows, the telephone poles, all that stuff is not on the front end of the painting.
Mm,
I'm laying in big value shapes for all that mass of trees back there by the main building.
right.
I'm laying shadows of the building in the distance. I'm laying in, drawing off the structures on the left side and keeping all those values simple when I lay them in. And then as I proceed through the painting, I'm breaking things down more and more. And
And and I'm noticing that you in doing so, you're also keeping a balance because one thing could take you away from everything else.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Hey, did I say complex to simple, or did I say simple to complex?
Complex to simple.
Huh?
You said complex to simple.
Yeah, backwards. I meant simple to complex.
Okay, we'll let you go. Man.
Complex, all the little details. Simple is the,
You got it right, no matter what you meant. It
yeah, I
can't
just
be fine. I mean, it looks really good. Uh,
yeah, simple to complex. That's how I try to approach painting.
that's probably the way I want to do it myself. So,
And so, you talk about your personality and the way you paint.
mhm.
You're going for the big simple shapes, and you can stop at any point. You don't have to take it to the extent that the detail that's shown in some of these paintings. You don't have to do that.
Well,
If you get the value structure and your colors right, you can stop at any point.
yeah, and that was the point that I was going to kind of come up to you with. We'll talk about that one in a minute, but that's the point that I was going to come up to you with. It says, you know, you've got a lot of artists. Well, I'm going to say probably more professional. Have a hard time saying when to quit. They say it's done, it's finished. Great. And I think I'm in that mode that you just got through talking about. I mean, I can throw in, I get the values, I get where things are at, but if I did more detail, it would take me longer for one thing. But it's not necessary because everything else is there. You
Yeah.
know, it's just adding to it without imbalancing everything else off of it, you
Yeah.
know. So
I don't think any of it's, there's not a wrong to any of it. I mean, you look at the Impressionists, for instance, and you like the Impressionists. I like them also. Um, they didn't have a lot of detail. They suggested a lot of stuff
right.
and used color to do it and value to do it. And they're beautiful paintings. So, and then there's, you know, then there's other, you know, it seems like through history, we move through phases. Impressionism has been a big movement for a lot of years. And the tendency seems to be, okay, if it's painted quickly, it's probably a more honest painting. You know, it's more the artist's personality is truly coming out because it's intuitive
Mhm.
and more emotional.
Mhm.
And those paintings, like maybe what I'm doing here, are less intuitive, I'd say. They seem to still resonate with people in capturing emotion, but they're more thought out and worked out and resolved, I guess, than I would say a lot of Impressionism is. It's just another way of working. And
Mhm.
there's room for all of us. That's why I love art. I don't feel like as artists we compete with anybody. We just need to be honest with ourselves and really develop our work to the highest level we can. And, you know, there'll be somebody out there that'll love it.
Well, that's the thing. You go into a museum and then say you look at art and you're sitting there saying, you know, well, he didn't finish that and he didn't finish that, but no, it's maybe there was a purpose for not finishing that, for you to finish it. We brought you in, we got you to the canvas, and we got you on it. You finish it out to how you think it should be. That's kind of where I'm going, and it's like in my art, at least, saying I don't want to finish everything, and that's why I think there's such a big popularity with loose painting. You know,
Yeah.
with men with loose painting, it is intuitive. It is not complete. It is like, how did you do the stroke more than like what did the stroke do? You know.
Yeah. No, you know, people seem to think, you know, for instance, if I'm judging a show or an impressionist judges a show, that all the work that is judged in that show is going to be similar to their work. That's not true at all. I could very easily choose impressionistic work to be one of the top paintings in the show. I'm not, I don't think any judge is really that way, that they're just zeroed in on their work and this is the only type of work that ought to be done. That isn't true. I love all kinds of work. And so, yeah, it just, but when it comes to our own work, just like you're talking about your own, be true to yourself. Stop where you want to stop. And I'm doing the same with my stuff. And I think that's what artists need to get to that point. But that takes time to get to that point because you need to have a confidence in your ability and
Right.
what you're doing and your understanding. David LaFell had a great quote, I've never forgotten it. He said, "We can only paint to our level of understanding." And that's really a true statement. You can
That,
only do that. Otherwise, it's an accident and a
that
freak accident, actually.
I mean, there are some people who are lucky, and they
Yeah.
do one out that just they don't know how they did it. It just turned out just wonderful,
Yeah.
and say, okay, we'll go do another one. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm lost.
I,
I don't
my
understand.
Yeah, my wife and I were talking the other day, and I was looking at we were looking at some older paintings. I don't know if I could do that painting again. But, you know, it's just strange. There's so much stuff that comes into each painting. I mean, it's where we are that day in life, what our emotions are, what our range of knowledge is, everything. It's not just cut and dry. We're not machines.
No, no, we're not looking for that one little
Yeah,
wish, and then give me another one because my wife wants one or somebody else
yeah,
wants. No,
yeah.
I get that. Well, John, I appreciate you coming on board and being with us. I mean, this was so enjoyable, and I've been wanting you on, and you've just given so much information as far as where things are going and how things are. Is there anything else that you want to kind of tap on before we kind of go on?
You made it easy, Phil. You just made this a really a nice conversation, which I appreciate. And no, I would say beginning artists should not You know, the easy thing is to get discouraged. And the thing too with social media, we're looking at so much stuff out there all the time, and we feel like we can't ever attain. There are some fantastic artists out there. I can never attain to that. And that would go through a lot of people's minds. And so they just kind of give up. But perseverance is a huge part of what we do. And so I would recommend for the artist that is on the verge of, I don't know if I can do this, or I'm too old to make anything of my life with as far as art goes. I don't know. And so their tendency is there to give up, but I'd say really persevere. And one other bit of advice I should have brought up when you talked about workshops is, it is very popular for students, I call them students, but to take lots of workshops. I'm going to study with this artist, I'm going to study with this artist, and they got a whole resume of artists they've studied with. Very dangerous, I think. I think they need to select one or two artists that their work really resonates with them and just study all they can with them. Because every artist has a different approach. I mean, your approach is different than mine different than somebody else, and yet we can all do great work. But we're going to have a different palette. We're going to have a whole different way of teaching. We're going to have a whole different emphasis when we're teaching. And it just gets really confusing. And so you walk away from that and your work, your mind is sort of blown. Okay, I don't know where to go. But the workshops are nice because you get to socialize and meet other stuff, but does your work really improve? And I've taught so many workshops over the years, and repeat students that I look back, they've been studying with different artists for 5-6 years. Their work hadn't changed a bit. That's dangerous. And so I would, I guess for closing remark there, I would really advise artists to select one or two. They just fall in love with their work and want to learn all they can from them, not to mimic their work.
Well, yeah, and that's goes back to what we were talking about. Is in today's world, which was not yesterday's world, there's so much choice, and there's so much out there, and there's people wanting you to choose them, and that is such a wrong way to go, because everybody thinks, well, I've taken a class, I'm an A student, and I'm great, and as you said, I'm now a fine artist. It's like it doesn't work that way.
No, there is value in honestly assessing our work relative to our peers. There's value in that, because if we're not honest and we just say, oh yeah, I'm doing great, my work is great, that's dangerous. And particularly if we're pleased with everything we do, very dangerous. I think we always need to be pushing and to a degree unsatisfied with what we're doing. I think that's what's going to help us continue to grow and to continue to explore. That's where the growth is going to come from.
Great having you on. Thank you very much, John, again, and we'll get you back on board down the road.
Look forward to it, Phil. Enjoyed it very much. Nice talking to you, and wish you all the best.